If you're a small business owner who's struggling to turn your contracts around quickly, you don't need to spend hundreds of dollars on advanced signing systems. I just built a automation process that moves data from my CRM into a templated document and then loads it into my e-signature tool that allows me to just sign it and send it. And the best part is these tools can be used on all free accounts. So if you're just starting out or looking to explore some cheaper options, this may be a lifesaver for you. So if you are struggling and hate having to deal with contract work, you've come to the right place. Let's get to it. How's it going? This is Eric with SolveCycle Solutions. If you're new here, I help save people time by automating the work that they hate with AI and no-code based solutions so they can focus on what they love instead. In this video, I'm going to be using one of my favorite tools, Make.com, to completely automate my contract signing process with the help of a new tool I've just discovered called SignWell. Don't worry if you're hearing a lot of big technical terms like HTTP commands or curl requests. I'm going to be trying to break this down as simply as possible and give you the complex script that you will need to implement this workflow. So this is meant to be a step-by-step process so that you can see how to quickly set this up and customize it in your own database. So before we start building, I want to clarify a couple of questions and make sure you have everything that you need before we get started. So first things first, the question is, why would you want to automate your contracts? You may think that this process is going to be too rigid or too inflexible and that it's not really worth the time investment. Well, I want to have you consider the main pain point with writing contracts. For me, I needed to automate this process because I would end up having to spend too much time searching for contract templates, having to rewrite lots of different aspects of my contracts, but then there would be mistakes of improper dates, old data that shouldn't be there, and that just looks unprofessional. And I realized I needed to streamline this process, and that's why this is set up here. So you'll see that here's some of the things to consider about why this is an important automation. Look at how many steps it takes to manually create the document, move it to different locations, and then have to sign it. The amount of time it takes, if you're on a team, it might require coordination, and there may be drops where someone doesn't get the notification to fill out a contract or to set up a template or even send out a contract. So the goal of this is to reduce the gap between how long it takes you from agreeing to working together with someone or another business to having that contract signed so that you can be more successful and turning these contracts around more quickly. So the goal here of this particular automation is to create a document from our data in our CRM and migrate that info over to our signing signature tool. Now, one thing to note is that I've already done the first part of this and being able to migrate the data from my CRM into a Google Doc template, which if you haven't watched that video, be sure to go back and watch that first before continuing here, because there are some vital steps that I will be picking up from where I left off on that video to emphasize more of the complex steps here. Here are the tools that I'm going to be using for this particular build. First and foremost is Make.com. This is the absolute most vital one here. But the second one that I want to emphasize is this tool, SignWell. This is another e-signature software that allows you to upload documents and templates. But what is unique about this is that it has an API documentation that you can build custom commands with. But the best part is that this integration or this software allows you 15 free API uses a month. So that means if you have this process set up, you could create up to 15 documents per month for free. So if you're not quite at the level where you need to have more, or you're making hundreds of contracts a month, you're probably on a whole different level than this. But this is probably good for most small businesses that are only doing between like 3 and 5 contracts a month or even less, but they don't want to pay for all of these extra features that they're not going to need just yet. Now, the last thing here is using a CRM to collect this data and to be able to map it. The main thing here is that you can use any CRM or any database tool that connects with Make.com. Airtable works perfectly fine here. You could integrate this with Salesforce, but because I use SmartSuite, I am going to be using that here. But just keep in mind that this is not limited to the exact CRM that I'm. So now that we have that recap, this brief recap set up, we need to move it into what are the next steps we need to take to move this data from this Google document here and put it into a HTTP request that will go into SignWell. SignWell has a really useful API database here that allows you to test certain commands and test building certain documents. I built my request out of these documentations here. All it requires is putting in your API key. The main things to note here, just a little bit of advanced jargon here, is that we need to be able to upload a specific file, a URL file from our Google Doc. So you'll see here that there's certain requirements that need to be added for this. And I'm using this just because it's a better structure to show this instead of in the actual request code here. But we will need to have the name and the file URL. So it needs to be a publicly available file. If we look at our Google Doc template, we are not able to move that just yet. And it's a couple of extra steps we need to take here. First is that we need to go into Google Doc modules and we need to download the document and where we can save it as a PDF. So I'm going to go ahead and unlink this SmartSuite update record. I'm going to attach this Google Doc here. From there, we're going to be able to map the specific document ID that we're looking for in the newly created contract that we've just set up. I'm able to save the type to a PDF. And from there, we're going to hit OK. The next step in this process, now that we've downloaded the document as a PDF, is that we need to upload it back into our Google Drive so that it is a publicly accessible document. So to do this, I'm going to open up the Google Drive module, and you'll see that there is an option for uploading a file. And then all I have to do is just upload this file, and we can map the folder ID somewhere specifically. In this case, I'm just going to select from list and use test, but you will map this wherever you need to. If you need to map it to specific contract or client contract folders, you can do that here as well. The next step is kind of the big, convoluted, scary step, but again, trying to make this as easy as possible for you. What you will need to do is go to the HTTP module and hit make a basic auth request. So you'll need to enter in the specific URL here. I'm going to just manually type this in, but it is signwell.com/API/v1/documents. This is trying to map information from into the document section of the SignWell system. The main thing that we are doing here is creating a document. We're not creating a document from a template. We are just creating the template really in Google Drive and then moving it into SignWell. So the next thing we're going to do is we need to change the method of this HTTP request, and that's going to be post. We don't need to add any headers or any query strings. We're just going to change the body type to raw, and we're going to change the content type to a JSON application request. The next step that we're going to be doing is putting in the request content. So this is where we're going to have a long chain command going in. So what I'm going to do is I have off on my other screen the entire HTTP request that I'm going to be adding into the comment section of this video. So you can just copy that. I would recommend putting it into a text file. You may need to format this a little bit. So I'm going to pause this, reformat, because you see it just pasted it all in one jumbled mess. So let me fix this and I'll be right back. A couple of things that you will need to go in and update yourself are that this code is set up as test mode equals true. This means that with the API commands, if you have this set up as true, this will not count towards your free 15 automation or API requests per month. So if you are testing this to make sure that the document works well, this is where you want to make sure that's turned on. It will make sure that the document is not a valid signable document for you to send to people. So this isn't some loophole that you can work around. This is going to be just for you to be able to test to make sure everything is pulling up properly. Once you are ready to turn this live, you can change this to false like this, or lowercase false. But for now, I'm going to leave this as true just so I can show you in the live demo once we're done here. You will have certain things set up as recipients. So these are the people that need to be signing the contract for you. So you will need to have the client that you will be signing, or the recipient, and then you also need to include your name as well. So you'll see that there's a lot of different info here, but I've tried to make this as capitalized and clear as possible, where it says map CRM first name and last name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this info here, and I'm going to pull up the SmartSuite data that we had. And then from there, I'm just going to take the first name and the last name and map that data here so that it is all accessible. So we will set the first name. Oh, the other thing that is a little bit confusing, if you click out of this request content block, it is going to reset the cursor to the very top. So you want to also double check that the info is not missing. Like if you click here, that it's not just reappearing later. And I think I put it in the wrong spot. So let's just do first name. I'm going to add a space, and then I'm going to hit last name as well. Oh, and yeah, you see, I just did the exact same thing I was warning you about. That is something it is a frustrating thing for me, but I'm going to be scanning this to make sure that there is no additional document or any names. But then, yes, the last thing that I need to do is map the email for the person we are sending this contract out to. So I'm going to hit email, and we'll see that pulls up. I'm going to click back in to the quotation marks and make sure that this item is surrounded by the quotation marks so that it knows this is what's going into this specific placeholder field. I then basically redid the exact same thing for myself. So I'm sending that contract out. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to map the Google Drive link. Specifically, what we're going to be looking for is called the web content link, which when we map this, it will understand to download this document as a specific file that we're looking for. I'm going to add the quote here, and then we need to map the Google Drive name. And basically, this is saying that inside of the Google Drive, it is showing up as the contract name .pdf. So this is where you're going to be taking that info out and making sure that this is pulling up exactly as is. Now, the additional thing here is that I'm going to pull back into the SignWell API, is that we have all the requirements set up now. There are some additional things that you can do if you wish to map the signing locations inside of the Google or inside of the contract. This is a little more advanced than what I want to do for this video, but I will make, again, if there's interest, I can make shorts showing how to map these particular fields or how you can modify them yourselves. Basically, I have the signature set up, and then I have the date as well as specific text, including like the person's name and title. The only things that I need to know here are mapping the X and Y locations specifically on the page. That's what takes a lot more, a couple of extra steps that are a little beyond what I want to show here. So again, if you want to learn more about that, feel free to let me know and I'll make a YouTube short for that. And then everything else is ready to go. You can remove these extra fields if you want. So just keep that in mind. Everything beyond this additional info block or below this can be removed if you don't want to deal with that. But I'm going to have the field set up here and I'm going to hit OK. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to relink the update records, and that's all I'm going to do. At this point, I don't have a specific URL to pull up the API or the SignWell ID so I can pull up specific documents, but I can just quickly pull that up on the side because the main thing here is that I want to just have this whole process streamlined so that I don't have to worry about it. From here, I'm going to run this test. So we have the original data. It's going to be creating the exact same document, just changing the entry date to the 12th. So I'm going to update this info. We're going to hit run once. And then from there, let's see what happens once this goes live. So I'm going to change this back to appointment. Because the original trigger that we had was that when this goes into make an offer, the system's going to fire off this automation and it's going to run everything. So it will go in and update the record to go into make a negotiation or enter a negotiation. So it takes a minute for this to run. You'll see that it's downloading it, re-uploading it into our Google Drive. And then from there, we have the API that is all set up here. So let me pull up my templates in the SignWell document and we'll go from there. Hi again. Little jarring, I'm sure, but same me, different day. Basically, I was recording this right before going on a little trip, literally last minute. And even though I had tested this, still had, of course, some errors run in that just stopped the automation from properly working. And I didn't have time to go in and troubleshoot. So I didn't want to just unuse all the video that I just set up, and I'm going to continue learning from the errors that I forgot to mention. So let's hop back into my screen now. So let me just recap some of the things I learned or had to re-update, and I'm just going to show you a couple of those things. The first thing you'll see here is that my first and biggest mistake was that I accidentally grabbed the wrong module for the HTTP request. This is make a basic authentication request. That is not the correct module we should be using. Instead, we should be using a slightly different one in the same module bracket. It's basically make an API request, API key auth request. It's just slightly different, but it allows you to put in more of the API integration so that it properly runs through and works. The second thing I had set up, and I believe I mentioned this, but just forgot, that this true needs to be lowercase if you're going to adjust it. I'll be sure to have that in the notes, but when you are changing it to false, make sure that that is lowercase. Everything that is not in brackets or in quotation marks should have lowercase there. And then the other big issue that I was having was I kept getting a confirmation that even though this automation was running successfully, like you may have seen in the initial setup, it kept saying when I would open the details of the HTTP request that I had an error code of 422. Basically, this is saying errors and that the URL provided too many redirects. Basically, what was happening, I thought I had set this up already, but the URL or the Google Drive that I was uploading things to, this particular folder for the example I was using was in a test folder. Now, what stopped working, what caused this to stop working, I found out, was that the test folder was not set up to be a public link or anyone can access this link. you need to make sure that the folder, wherever you're setting it to, is set up so that it can access this information to anyone who has a link. That allows Make to pull this information out. One other thing you may need for this particular automation is if the Google Drive is not uploading properly or it's not extracting info to the HTTP, you may have to follow these steps here for Google Drive API documentation. This is something using the Google Cloud Console project. This is an advanced permission that Google is requiring for certain aspects of taking information from them. And I made a video on that I'll link here so that you can take a look at that as well. It can be a little bit tricky. If this doesn't work, use this as a last resort. I would not recommend setting up this Google Cloud Console unless things are just not working for you. So again, we have this process all set up now, and it is set to work properly. I have to update some email addresses, but from here, I'm going to be able to migrate all the information from SmartSuite, create it as a Google Doc, and then Google Drive is going to be able to share that info with the Make API. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this, and we're going to run this once. I'm going to hop back over into SmartSuite, and now we can run the final test of this automation. I'm going to pop my name over into Make an Offer, and then from there, you will see in just a second, this whole automation will go through. It's going to take the document, turn it into a PDF, store it back in the Google Drive, and then also import that into SignWell, and then update the information inside of SmartSuite. Now, the only thing that I can't do right now is update the URL, or I can't pull the document ID yet from this HTTP request, but that's something I'll play around with later. Now, I do need to cut out the opening the SignWell document, just I have some private information in there, but you can see this is the document that I created that is for October 14th. So it is adding the new date of today compared to when I recorded this previously, has all the names that I have, putting in specific info that I requested, the rates and everything. So now all I have to do is just mark where this Eric Michael needs to sign and where I need to sign. So I can do that, and as soon as I'm done with that, I can just hit send. This obviously took a little bit longer and had some hiccups along the way, but I hope this does clarify ways, not only just how you can automate this yourself, but help you understand how to work through some of the problems and some of the troubleshooting you need to think about when facing no-code breakdowns like this. It didn't take long for me to go in and figure it out once I got back from my trip, but it is something important that you do need to go through and kind of check all these certain processes to make sure everything is working properly. There is still much that I can do with these solutions, and like I mentioned previously, I may set up some shorts just to show how to enhance a few of these specific items as well, just because I think it's important to know, but they're not as necessarily relevant for getting this up and running right now. So if you have questions or any requests, please feel free to leave them in the comments of this video. But also, please don't forget that if you are trying to build this and get stuck, don't get discouraged. You can reach out to me for a free 30-minute consultation where I can get this whole process set up for you. Or if there's something else you're looking to get automated in your business, I'd love to have a conversation and learn how we can get this set up. So head to the link in the description of this video or scan the QR code that's floating around my head somewhere. Once again, thank you so much for watching. And if you feel like this was useful, please consider subscribing to the channel. And that's all I've got to say on this topic. This is where I stop.